So I give the floor to Daniel Kalinowski or Richard Berlinski and Lucian Ciemięcki. Please.
Thank you. Polish writers at the Slavic Congress in Prague. The Polish delegation in Prague had several of those representatives. Among them, there were also writers. Let us just mention in alphabetical order their names: Ryszard Berliński, August Bielowski, Edmund Chojecki, August Cieszkowski, Andrzej Wrzański, Józef Cieszkowski, Adam Gorczyński, Karol Liwert, Leszek Łukasiewicz, Lucjan Ciemiński. There I mentioned about only writers, not politicians, only writers. And people where I mentioned, some of people mentioned here were not men of letters in today's sense, people who deal with literature in professional and exclusive way. Their literary status resulted from the fact that at times they were more activists of Polish intellectual community, publishers or organizers than authors of consistently published volumes of literature or prose. Dealing with literature, culture, of science, these people created an intellectual and artistic environment which, as in many cases in the Polish lands, maintained and developed ethnic identity. On this slide we see a right side exactly description of Congress in Prague from point of view historical. And when in spring of 1848 the possibility on an all Slavic Congress in Prague arose, Polish writers also wanted to participate in it. After all, at least some of them maintained contacts with non-Polish writers active in Bohemia, Slovakia and Lusatia. Even if these relations were not always deep, the sense of Slavic cultural community uniting the Western, Southern and Eastern Slavs was noticeable. Among the issues planned to be solved during the Congress, each of the Slavic nations wanted to counteract Germanization and majorization in their native countries. And among the Polish writers of the delegation at the Prague Congress, two of them directly referred to the broadly understood Slav issues in their works. At this point, I'm thinking about Lucjan Ciemięcki and Ryszard Berliński, who expressed their interests in the past and present times of the Slavs in works written both before and after 1848. Especially their presence at the Old Slavic Congress testified to the belief that universal knowledge about the past of ancestors was expressed in bell letters is a value that should be protected. And we see, let's say, Ciemięcki in this time, 40s, 19th century, and Ryszard Berliński. And the interest in the Slavic culture and Polish intellectual culture, which can be considered as an academic proposal in the norms of the scientific style of time, is visible already in the Enlightenment. When the works Adam Laruszewicz, Adam Potocki appeared. In bell letters, similar themes appeared a bit later, thanks to Julian Niemcewicz, Jan Woronicz, or Kazimierz Grodziński. There were not many such turns towards the Slavs. However, on the wave of patriotic creativity sources of identity for Polish culture were found not only in the Latin Roman tradition, but also in the native pre-Christian or Sarmatian tradition. And when we talk about Siemiński, it's worthy of notice of the Polish Romantics who stayed in Poland, as well as those who wrote about the Slavic topics before 1848. He was the author of a very interesting poem entitled Trumpets in the Dnieper, original from the Dnieprze, written in 1853 and published in the Lviv Almanac Zielona in 1839. And we see this Almanac Zielona, first page. And when we can describe this poem, this work depicts Bolesław Chrobry, and the second Polish king, and his war expedition in Rutenia, shown in the Poetics of the Chanson de Geste. However, in addition to the aim of praising the virtues of the Polish king, the poem constantly recurred to the theme of Slavic power, which stretched from Elbe River to the Black Sea. This work is not only reference to the eastern territories inhabited by the Slavs, but also the evocation of the western borderlands and the memory of Slavic history of tearing apart at the mouth of the Oder River and the Baltic Sea, associated with the various Slavic tribes near Denmark. And the most important positive message of From the Dnieprze is the signal for pan-Slavic identity uprising, the awakening of the ethnic spirit, which, despite the passage of centuries and negative historical experiences, in the poet's view, has still not disappeared. The return to pre-Christian times, to the Slavic ethnos, a mythical homeland shown in the fascination with the Middle Ages, is an appreciation of the antiquity and in which the Slavic language dominated and was not opposed by other European ethnic elements. And we see first page this poem from the Dnieprze in original Polish language. And when we think about Siemiński, we need to remember about his other works, about Slavic past. And we see left side a book, we see Poznań, published in Poznań, 1845. Podania and legends and fable stories. And it is exactly from 4th edition. But we see right side, it's very interesting for historical, professional historical, because it is like not academic, more literary description of Polish history from before Christianity to time 19th century. Okay, and next, Berliński, not less artistically and ideologically interesting was Richard Berliński in his work Bogunka na Gople, in which the description of the Slavic space is by no means limited to the territory of one region. The lyrical subject, using the figure of a wanderer, ethnographica, and collector of precious memorabilia, visit the lands of the Slavs and extracts from the landscape, ruins and folktales a specific emotional history of glorious past. The subject's attention was focused on Lake Gothwo, the cradle and grave of the Slavic past. And meditation of this peculiar place of power of the Slavs bring the conviction that in order to understand the spirit of the Slavs, knowledge about native pre-Christian gods receiving worship in various places in Europe is needed. Berlinski did not follow Johann Gottfried Herder's vision of the Slavs as gentle people engaged only in agriculture, but also wanted to emphasize their belligerence and military abilities. The most dramatic part of the poem, Bojan's Song, in which in the foreground there is warning for the Slavs about the negative consequences of abandoning their Christian beliefs. From this song emerges praise of the native cultural tradition and criticism of Latin Christian world, which destroyed the former Slavic community. Berlinski wanted to return to Slavic paradise with an idealistically presented religious, linguistic, and cultural community. And we see other work of Berlinski, Polish powieści wielkopolskie, story from Greek Colonia. And we see one picture, very, very interesting picture, because we see three parts, three levels of Polish history from point of view Berlinski. Second is agriculture time, we see a windmill, and second Middle Ages with a big tower, and the last part we see church, it is Christian time. And works by Szymiński and Berlinski are an example of literature whose task is to strengthen the national spirit. The authors of Polish culture taught that the idealization, realization, and mythicization of the past was a remedy for the cultural discourse of Russia and Russia, which dominated in the Polish lands. In addition, looking at their work from the point of view of methodological psychoanalysis of literature, works with a glorious past, showing Slavic unity, material and spiritual wealth, were an act of compensation. Since the current 19th century experience of the Slavs lacked positive factors stimulating development, they had to be created on the pages of literature. Preferably one that took place in the earliest times. As a result, writers of such works did not have to feel younger or worse in Europe. Literary works brought with them a very strong emotional factor. It was sometimes more important than historical knowledge, because it referred to the sphere of imagination, desire, and myth, not the evil of modern world. Yeah, and first part of conclusion. Examples of two Polish men of letters who were present at the Congress of Prague in 1848 show a broader phenomenon. It is about fulfilling the function of an artist in the Polish cultural tradition of the 19th century. In accordance with the romantic ideas of the visionary artist and an artist's spiritual guide, the author of the poems took responsibility not only for how he wrote, but also for what he wrote about. Therefore, he cared not only for the quality of the ways of expressing his imagination and skills, but also engaged in the promotion of social and political views. Siemiński and Barwiński, as writers describing Slavic culture, wanted to promote with their works the view that it is dynamic, diverse, and constantly revealing tradition. They show the history of Slavic ethnos not from the time of the introduction of Christianity, but reached back to fairy tale history, using modest historical sources, intuitive archaeology, and above all, their own imagination. Reaching back to the early Middle Ages, they could probe where the Slavs come from, design their external appearance and internal disposition. And said, they were also supported by other Polish participants of the Congress, such as August Szyszkowski, Karol Liebert, or Karol Szajnowy. Siemiński, maybe some commentary about this picture. Słowa wieszcze, it is text created after Congress in Prague by August Szyszkowski, like a prophet. He was like not historical only. In this brochure, a book like he appeared like a poet. And Siemiński and Barwiński dialogued with the greatest poets of the Polish immigration in Paris, such as Adam Mickiewicz and Juliusz Słowacki. However, in their assessment of the Slavic past, they were more closely related to the program developed earlier by Zorian Dołęga-Chodakowski, who sharply criticized the influence of Western culture on Slavism. And last, at the time, writers such as Wacław Hanka, Wacław Ledeski, Paweł Szafirzyk, Ludowit Sztur, or Józef Tyl were creating images of the Slavic community in their works. Of course, the proposals of Czech or Slovak writers who appeared at the Congress in Prague were different in plot solutions and historical facts quoted. However, it is worth noting that they were all convinced of the glorious past of the Slavs. Moreover, together they felt a sense of the cultural wrong done by Germanic feudalism and Latin Christianity. In the current reality of the state of the nations, Siemiński, Barwiński, and many Slavic writers believed that they lived in cultural oppression in countries, exactly by Russia, that denied them their right to independence and freedom. Therefore, they decided, together with historians, activists, and representatives of various social groups, to remedy the negative situation. The Prague Congress in 1848 proved that at the level of discussions and ideological declarations, it was possible to work out an all-Slavic agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I have some question to you, but for the discussion after the second paper of Andorakos Mesaros, The Echo of a Prague Congress in Hungary in 1848. Please. I introduce briefly Andor Messaros, that you know better than me, is a colleague of Eötvös Loránd University, Faculty of Humanities. We had the pleasure to have him invited in Milan because with Eötvös Loránd University we have an Erasmus, a fruitful Erasmus agreement and an exchange of students and scholars. And I hope that we will develop our initiatives. And so this meeting about the Slavic Congress is a very important point of reflection. And Messaros has various research fields of great interest, that is to say, cultural and political relation in Central Europe, Central European cultural history, and history of Central European University education and peregrination, because peregrination was a main key in order to visit and connect all these countries. So please, and the echo of the Prague Congress in Hungary.
Thank you very much. This is a thankless task to speak about the Hungarian opinion about the Prague Congress. I would say that I came to bury Caesar, to praise him, because the echo of the Slavic Congress in Prague was not quite favorable in Hungary, and was even met with complete rejection. Of course, this point of view determined also the Hungarian and Czech political relations for a long time, until the second half of 19th century. And the reason of this was that the basic idea of the Prague Congress fundamentally contradicted the Hungarian public law thinking of the reform era, or of the formation of the modern Hungarian policy from the last decades of 18th century. After all, the biggest dilemma of the Hungarian public law thinking was precisely the dilemma between, on the one hand, the straightening of the independent nature of the historical Hungarian statehood, the historical indivisible Hungarian statehood within the framework of the Habsburgian Empire, and on the other hand, the modern, ethnically and language-based national movement at the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries. And the basis of this Hungarian state law thinking was the pragmatica sanctio. According to these, the members of the Hungarian political elite accepted the principle of the indivisibility of the countries and lands under the rule of Habsburgian rulers, and also the person of the common ruler, but they maintained the requirement of the Hungary's independence within the empire and its own separate government according to its own laws on historical constitution. And on the other hand, on the part of the Habsburgs, They also recognize the validity of the Hungary's separate state status, the so-called historical dualism within the empire, the position of the Hungarian king. And at the Hungarian parliament in 1791 was already raised also the issue of the Hungarian language in the state life of Hungary, but this step was not at all a manifestation of the modern ethnic Hungarian national movement yet. The members of the Hungarian parliament wanted just to replace the archaic Latin with the more with the Hungarian, which was regarded as more modern, because of the counterbalancing, the Germanization of the other territories, other lands of the Habsburgian Empire, expressed with this step that Hungary is historically separate from the other lands of the empire, as the famous historical phrase said from this Hungarian parliament. Hungary cannot be governed in the same way as the other territories of the empire, as the other lands of empire, because Hungary has a historical constitution, ideological foundation of the San Stefan's crown, lands of San Stefan. Of course, the elite of the so-called Hungarian reform era already realized that the increasingly widespread use of the Hungarian language, Parliament of 1836 and 1844 about the official use of Hungarian language. So this increasingly use of the Hungarian language would result in the initiation of the Hungarian, or I'd say Magyar national movement on the ethnic and language basis, and this movement would encourage and also catalyze the movement of other non-Hungarian, non-Magyar nationalities of the Hungarian state, but the Hungarian political elite of the reform era had a very huge optimistic partner, the optimistic members of the Hungarian political elite of the reform era, and they believed that the successes of the state reforms, the construction of a modern Hungarian state, modern Hungarian civic state, the extension of rights and equality of rights would almost automatically go hand in hand with the acceptance of the existence of the unified Hungarian political nation by the nationalities of Hungarian state as a modern form of the former Hungarus identity, and the nationalities will became or will remain Hungarus out of gratitude because of the extension of rights in the Hungarian state. And this idealistic or optimistic idea was represented, for example, by the main actor of the Hungarian reform era, by István Széchenyi, and also Ferenc Deák. Ferenc Deák wrote about the unifying power of the extension of rights in Hungary in his letter in 1842. But there was in Hungarian political elite who adopted the unifying rule of the extension of rights, referred to that the Hungarian state is too diverse and too multi-ethnic. For instance, one of them was Miklós Veselényi. Their fear was precisely that the start of the modern Hungarian national movement and its possible success would work against the Hungarian historical state, or against the unity of the historical Hungarian state. They said that if the Hungarians who are only in a relative majority within the Hungarian state, the Magyars who are only in a relative majority within the Hungarian state, succeed, this will not be an attraction for not Hungarians, not Magyars, but quite the opposite. They will start their own national movement, and they would want regain similar political rights as have the Magyars, or just they will scare, fearing that they will have to assimilate, they have fearing from the Magyarization of the Hungarian state. Miklós Veselényi wrote about this in his famous book, Szózat a magyar és szláv nemzetiség ügyében, in Hungarian, a speech on the issue of the Magyar and Slavic nationality in Hungary. And this book was published already in 1843, but Veselényi couldn't publish this book in Hungary. Such a lamentation about the future of the Hungarian policy Veselényi could publish just in Leipzig, abroad. And Veselényi thought that the nationalities were turning away from the Magyars, from the Hungarians, and the Slavs will look towards Tsarist Russia. This was the famous Hungarian Magyar fear from the Pan-Slavism, and the Hungarian state may disintegrate it, will disintegrate it. And the second such a Hungarian politician was László Teleki. László Teleki was an enthusiastic supporter of the reform era and the Hungarian Magyar Revolution in 1848, and he had some same opinion about the future of the Hungarian, or the future possibilities of the Hungarian policy. He also saw this dilemma. And when Kossuth issued the declaration of the Hungarian independence in the second year of the Hungarian Revolution in March of 1849 in Debrecen, Teleki, who was emissary of the Hungarian revolutionary government, the Batyányi government in Paris, sent a letter to Kossuth, to Lajos Kossuth, with this word, with this declaration, with the declaration of the independence of the Hungarian Magyar state, died not only Austria, only the Habsburg monarchy, but died also the Saint Stephen's Hungary, or the Hungary on the historical constitution, and independent ethnic Magyar state cannot be within the framework of the historical Hungarian state. It must be a smaller ethnic Magyar state. And because of this, that's why that is why Palacký's letter sent to Frankfurt, which became very fast, widely known in Hungary, caused such a consternation. The Hungarian elite believed that the Czechs will do the same as Hungarians, that the Czech will refer to its historical rights as the representatives of the other historical kingdom within the Habsburg Empire. And it caused outrage reactions when ethnic demands appeared in Prague, and the Hungarian reform era efforts, the Hungarian reform era efforts were evaluated as tyranny, as Magyar tyranny against the nationalities. Lajos Kossuth published an article in his own journal, Kossuth hírlapja, Kossuth's journal, about the proclamation of the Prague Congress in June of 1848, and Kossuth angry objects to these statements made about the so-called Hungarian tyranny, Magyar tyranny. He was mostly afraid of the impact of the Prague Congress on mainly on the Croats, and I think that this is very interesting. That not for the Slovak movement, but on the Croats who were in a similar Kossuth regarded as that the Croats are in a similar situation in the Hungarian state or in the Hungarian parts of the empire as are the Czechs on the other side of the empire. And Kossuth wrote that the Croatians supported the introduction of Hungarian language as the official language in 1830. He wrote they did not see in this assimilation effort by the Magyars, but rather a symbol of separation from Vienna, a symbol of the independency of the Hungarian state from Vienna. But then, because of the Prague Proclamation, the Hungarian historical legal arguments come into conflict with the ethnic ideas. Kossuth wrote that modern murdering hands rose against us, from where we had to expect the most excellent signs of recognition. The Congress of Prague wants the freedom of Slavs, as wrote Kossuth, Slav peoples. This is an action against the historical statehood of Hungary, of the Hungarian state, and moreover, with this they turn to the Tsarist Russians, from whom they will not receive freedom. Moreover, while they reject the historical legal argument and the voice of freedom in connection with ethnic arguments, they are who wants to conquer the Hungarians. They want to break off the Hungarians, Magyars, Slavic areas of the historical Hungarian state. So they want to divide the historical Hungarian state. Kossuth in June 1848 did not believe in a peaceful solution between the legal-based freedom struggle of Hungarian revolution, but of course it was also more ethnically Hungarian. The proclamation of 15th of March in 1848 started with words that what does want the Hungarian or Magyar nation. So between the, as Kossuth said, legal-based freedom struggle and the ethnic-based movement. And he wrote in his article about the measuring these words. He said that the Prague Proclamation, the result of this ethnic and language movement will be a civic war within the Hungarian state. And the other opinion, the opinion of similar opinion.
5 minutes.
Okay, I have.
Yeah, can you succeed in 5 minutes? Because I have to remember that our relations are of 20 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Julia, that means that we won't have a coffee break. We cannot have a coffee break because it's already almost 11:30.
But we decided to reduce the coffee break because we had a pause. We decided to have 15 minutes of coffee break in order to to have everything,
Yeah.
I hope, Ok, scusa se ti ho disturbato, prego.
So the Hungarian writer Zsigmond Kemény, who was supporter of the sort of optimistic members of the Reform era, had a similar opinion in Pesti Hírlap in 11 of June 1848, and which was very interesting that I read Hungarian. Firstly, in his article that the Czechs ended with Bohemism and started the sort of Czechism, Czechizmus, as Kemény wrote in Hungarian. And because of this, the Prague Congress was a big disappointment for the Hungarian political elite. The initial expectation was that they would find as ally, they find an ally in the Czechs against Vienna, or against the efforts of Vienna in the matter of independence. And because of this, the Hungarian public opinion felt welcome because of the fall of the Prague Congress. As Kemény wrote in his article, the fall of the Congress strengthened the historical legal position of the empire, and that the members of Congress thought that Hungary was planned. Kemény wrote that in Prague, Hungary was planned for breakfast, Austria for lunch, and Germany for dinner, but they, the members of the Congress, were counting their chicken too early, and he wrote that it is a success for the historical legal opinion, the fall of the Prague Congress, but this ethnic language movement, which started at the first half of 19th century, was regarded from the basis of the Hungarian historical statehood very dangerous for the integrity of the Hungarian state. And this is my last picture. This is comics from the end of the 19th century, from a Hungarian paper. And this is a Czech German hospital, and the German, the old empire is dying, and the Czech is beginning of newborn. And thank you very much.
Prego, Zdenko.
Grazie. Two things that I would like to say. I would like to ask you, is Czeszkowski that you mentioned the one of Orchinash?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I come across him, when I was doing a lot of research on non-Russian Pan-Slavism. That is, people like Mickiewicz and others, who were Pan-Slavs in their own way, but they were not, of course, they were opposed to Russian Pan-Slavism. So, but they as you know, in his Paris lectures, he, in effect, adopted a sort of a form of Pan-Slavism, which suited the Poles, and the Poles had their own form of Pan-Slavism. And the other thing that I would like to say is that some of you may think that this arrangement between Hungary and the rest of the Habsburg monarchy, such as it was anachronistic in many ways. Well, it was, but it had certain specific characteristics, and one of them was that in the Hungarian part of the monarchy, in Hungary, a woman would not inherit the throne. And that's why in all of the documents, Maria Theresa is always referred to as pro nostro re, for our king. In other words, Hungary made it absolutely clear that it's governed by its own laws, and these laws were not the ones of the first the Holy Roman Empire, and then later on this ersatz, Austria and so on. But to come back to this whole point is that those of you who are familiar with the present day world will know that exactly the same constitutional relationship as it was between Hungary and the rest of the Habsburg monarchy still exists between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and a lot of smaller countries of the Commonwealth, and Great Britain. Charles has exactly the same relationship to Australia as, for instance, Ferdinand or whatever had to Hungary. In other words, it's a personal union, and the parliaments are different, and the laws may be different and everything else, but they have a common monarch. And that's exactly how it was with Hungary. So it's not something that has disappeared in the 19th century, but still covers a huge territory of the globe. So something to think about. That this wasn't anachronistic. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Please.
Yeah. First of all, one remark. We know that famous picture when Maria Theresa was crowned in Pressburg, Poznan, that the nobles, put their swords in the Vidam and Sanguinem, pro Regina Nostra, not pro Regina Noster. But I wanted to say something to Dr. Mesaroš. By the way, you are just revising my text on the history of Slovakia, and there is a chapter about it. I am Jan Vicky. The attitude of the Czechs before 1848 and in 1848, despite the Slavic conquest, was exactly the same as those of Hungarians. They never gave up the idea of historical kingdom, where the Germans were to be a minority. That's why they were against it. Naturally, no one wants to be a minority in the nation state of somebody else. That's how it couldn't work. So, in fact, despite what Kossuth wrote, they're absolutely on the same politically and philosophically level. That's also why later Rieger went to Budapest in 1880, and he was discussing with Hungarian liberals, and said, we have, as far as Upper Hungary is concerned, only cultural interests in the Slavs. We do not want to harm the integrity of Hungarian crown. Why? Because he knew that if Bohemians are to obtain the same status as Hungary has, then of course he cannot somehow harm the idea of the integrity of Hungary. So it was, I think, a big misunderstanding. And also, when, as an exception, at the Diet in Kremsier in February 1849, I was talking about it yesterday in my paper, Palatsky proposed, okay, let's do it on strictly ethnic base. Means Czech ethnic territory in Bohemia, Moravia, and Upper Hungary inhabited as well. It was rejected not only by the German deputies, but also by the rest of the Czech deputies. This is absolutely out of question.
May I have a question for Daniel Kalinowski. That is to say, we know very well the work done by romantic Poles in gathering materials about Slavic past. They discovered Ukrainians in a certain way. They were the first culture of Ukrainian Slavic reality. But when you speak about Middle Age, this Middle Age is what kind of a Middle Age? Middle Age is the Rus of Kiev, or is Granduki of Romania in the pagan times before the Christianization of Leibniz? Because this Middle Age is something too much, in my opinion. It's just related to an emotional moment. And it is quite confusing because this Middle Age is for the Slavs, but through Volchars. And the others, well, they are. And the other thing is, just remark, observation, because the situation of Hungary is not different from the situation of Italy, and Hungary and Italy are related for wars during the spring of the peoples, in victory and in defeat. And we know that Kossuth died after in Italy, and Battiani was a collaborator of Garibaldi. So there is a certain contradiction in fostering the historical rights of Hungary and to propose a modern idea of Hungary that is a revolutionary one, anti-absolutist, and in the same spirit of the Italian Second War of Independence, First and Second War of Independence. And this is also a key in order to understand why for Italians and Hungarians the Slavic Congress was disturbing in a certain way. But we could develop these ideas with D'Alessandri in our paper. Yeah.
I'd like to address something that Professor Ricci said. The big difference between the Crown of St. Wenceslav and the Crown of Sistina. I'm talking in purely legalistic terms and from historical right, so-called perspective, is that the Crown of St. Wenceslav, that is the Czech lands, were conquered after the Vila War and stripped of their elective rights. In other words, after 1620, right, the Habsburgs automatically succeeded without the Diet approving their succession. They became hereditary rulers. That's what I'm talking about. Hungary never became a hereditary kingdom and therefore preserved its elective status. And this is the reason why the pragmatic sanction, that's the second reason. The first reason was that Maria Theresa, as you pointed out, was a woman, and she was treated as though she was a man. And that's why they all stood up and said, Vitam and sanguinem pro nostro rege Maria Theresa. Of course, she wasn't the king, but the fiction had to be maintained, otherwise she couldn't rule. She had no right to rule as a woman. So the fiction was maintained. But the second one was that she had to be approved. She wasn't automatically succeeding in Hungary because Hungary was an elective kingdom. And this is a very, very important difference. Now you may argue that after 1848-49, when Kossuth's War of Independence failed and everything else, Hungary was temporarily stripped of this. But it was too late. This is a difference of about 2.5 centuries, and in the 19th century you couldn't do what Ferdinand and the Jesuits could do back in 1620, that is deprive the Czech lands of all of their independence. And that's why later on, of course, in the Austrian part of the Hungary, after the Ausgleich, the Czechs tried, as you know, the Czechs really tried to become something similar what, some sort of an Ausgleich. But it couldn't be done because the Habsburgs would not go along, they would not approve of it. And this is, it's something that happened, a few kilometers from here, which is Bila Hora. It was a decisive battle, as far as the Habsburgs were concerned. Yeah.
Please, last.
Yes, I would like to add a short commentary to Mr. Kalinowski's lecture because you have shown the features of Slavic movement in Poland. It means attitude to the medieval and pre-medieval past, paganism instead of Christianism, and we have now in Poland since about 10 years very great and very interesting culture phenomenon in the so-called Turbo Lechits or Great Lechit movement, which is especially active in the internet, so the people who are believing in Great Lechitic Empire, which is identity with the whole Slavdom from northern till Peloponnesus. It was of course Polish, a kind of Polish statehood, which was afterwards suppressed by Christianity and by Germans who forbidden to mention it, so therefore the historians, as me, are paid by Church and Germans, I think, who are silent about this. So I want to inform you that now in Gniezno, in the Museum of the Origins of Polish statehood, there is an exhibition, I think, till the end of June, about this phenomenon. There is also a scientific research conference from which the materials are in Polish, of course, were published internet, I think. So who knows, Polish can watch the site of this museum. Thank you.
The Mies, as our colleague said, the Mies is always appealing. The Mies, even in the internet times. Anyway, please, you can.
Sorry, just some last remarks. I think that the main problem was the lack of the common identity or the form of the common identity in Hungary in the 19th century. The Hungarian political elite regarded the formation of a Hungarian political nation as a new form of the former Hungarus identity, and they wanted to form a new Hungarus identity in modern way. And then the second one is the every form of the ethnic autonomy or the language autonomy was regarded mainly in the second half of 19th century by the Hungarian political elite as division of the unity of the historical Hungarian statehood. So also the language rights. So here in Czech lands, bifurcation of the Prague University into a German and Czech university. It was naturally formation of the modern ethnic society, but in Hungary the formation of a system of schools on the not Hungarian language. It was regarded as a form of the separatist movement, as the form of the danger of Slavism against the unity of the Hungarian state.
Thank you.